In this video, I will cover everything you need to know to start using the VLOOKUP function. We will explore how it works, look at examples, and discuss the common problems and errors you may encounter when working with the VLOOKUP function. So, let's get started. With Microsoft Excel, you can not only perform calculations, but also consolidate data. This means that you can combine data from different tables, sheets, or even books into one table. Excel has a range of functions to solve such tasks, and one of the oldest and most popular is the VLOOKUP function. The name VLOOKUP is a sort of abbreviation for vertical lookup. From the name alone, it's not immediately clear what the VLOOKUP function does, but it's quite simple. The VLOOKUP function allows you to pull data from one table to another, based on a specific criterion. For example, we have two tables, a price list with product prices, and a table with an invoice. We could manually input prices from the price list by referencing the corresponding cells. However, this is extremely inconvenient and time-consuming, especially if the tables are large and located in different sheets. With the VLOOKUP function, we can automate the entire process and pull prices from the price list to the invoice based on the product name. In this case, the criterion that links the data from the two tables is the product name, which is the same in both the price list and the invoice. The operation of the VLOOKUP function can be explained simply using the example of a phone book or any other alphabetical index. For instance, if we need to find the phone number of a certain company, we open the corresponding letter in the phone book and start searching from the top down. We go through all the names on the page until we reach the desired company. Then, we look at the adjacent column, which contains the phone number. This is exactly how the VLOOKUP function works. It scans from top to bottom in the leftmost column of the selected range, and search of the criterion specified by the user. Once it finds it, it moves to the specified number of columns to the right, and returns the value from that cell. Now, let's take a look at the syntax of the VLOOKUP function and its arguments. Let's examine them using the example of a simple phone book. So, we have a small table with 4 columns. The first column contains the record numbers, the second, friends' names, the third contains addresses, and the last one has phone numbers. In this data array, we need to find Michael's phone number. We will use the VLOOKUP function. When we start typing a function name, the formula autocomplete window appears, allowing us to select the desired function from the list. We can press the tab key to autocomplete the function name. A tooltip will appear with the syntax of the function. It shows that the function has 4 arguments separated by a comma. The first is the lookup value. This is what we need to search for in the data array, which in our case is the name Michael. Since this is text, we need to enclose it in quotation marks. The second argument is called table array, but in fact we should specify only the range of values where the search will be conducted, not the entire table. This argument defines where the search will take place. If the first row contains column headers, we should not include them in the selection. It's important to remember that the VLOOKUP function only searches in the leftmost column of the selected range. So the first column of the table is also not of interest to us since we are looking for a name, which is in the second column of the table. So, we specify the range that includes names, addresses, and phone numbers. But why do we select not just the column with names where we are searching for the lookup value? The reason is that the lookup value will be searched in the first column of the selected range, however the function needs to return not that value, but the value that is in the same row of the table. In our example, that is the phone number. Therefore, we expand the range to include all columns up to the one we need. As a result, the range also includes the column with addresses. But how do we tell the function from which column we want to return the value? That is, how do we specify that we need the phone number and not the address? This is where the third argument comes into play. It is very important to note that the column number is specified in the selected range, not the column number on the Excel sheet. In our example, the selected range consists of 3 columns. The first will be the names column, the second will be the addresses column, and the third will be the phone numbers column. This is very important, so I'll say it again. The count starts from the first column of the selected range, not from column A of the Excel sheet. Since we need to return the phone number which is in the third column of the selected range, we enter 3. And the last, most mysterious argument is range lookup. This argument is logical and can take only 2 values, true or false. For simplicity, these values can be represented by numbers, respectively, 1 and 0. Note that this argument is enclosed in square brackets. This means it is optional, but if it not specified, Excel will assume it to be true by default. But what is this argument, and what does it affect? From the description, it follows that the value true corresponds to an approximate match, while the value false corresponds to an exact match. For now, we will use the second option since we are looking for a name, and are interested in an exact match of the lookup value. We will discuss approximate matching later with another example. We press enter and get the result. Let's analyze how the VLOOKUP function works. We set the name Michael as the lookup value. Remember that the VLOOKUP function always searches for the lookup value in the leftmost column of the selected range. Moving from top to bottom, it compares the specified lookup value with the values in the first column of the selected range. As soon as it finds the desired value, the vertical search ends, and the function shifts its focus to the cell specified by the third argument. We specified the third column, so the function returns the value from that cell. Now, let's adjust the formula to find Rachel's phone number by her record number in the phone book. For this, we will specify 3 as the lookup value, and also change the range to include column A. If we do not change the column number in the formula now, we will end up getting not the phone number, but the address. That is under the third number in the specified range. In other words, the function will return the value from the third column of the selected range. By changing the value to 4, we will get the desired result. If the lookup value is not found in the column, for example, if we specify a number that does not exist in our table, the function will return the error. This error indicates that the lookup value does not exist in the column where the search was performed. Now that we have clarified the syntax, let's move on to practice. Now let's look at an example of using the VLOOKUP function. We have 3 tables, a price list, a list of employees, and an order table. All 3 tables can be located on different sheets or even in different workbooks. For convenience and simplicity, I have placed them on one sheet. Our task is as follows. Insert prices from the price list into the order table. Calculate the total for each order. Determine the city of the order. The last task can be easily accomplished using the list of employees, as each manager is responsible for a specific city. First, let's insert the product prices from the price list. To do this, we will create a formula using the VLOOKUP function. We need to look for the price of the product, so we will specify the cell containing the product name as the lookup value. Next, we need to define the range in which the search will be conducted. This is the price list table. Remember, we only include the necessary values in the range, excluding the headers of the table itself. The price list table consists of 2 columns. We will search in the first column and take the price value from the second column, so we specify 2. And we need an exact match, so the last parameter will be 0 or false. We see that the price has been correctly pulled in. Now we just need to copy the formula across the range using autofill. Here, a problem may arise. The issue is that in the formula, we specified the range of the price list as relative references. This means that when we copy the formula using autofill, the previously selected range shifts down. To solve this problem, we will make the reference to the price list absolute. We will adjust the formula in the first cell of the column, select the range, and press the F4 key. There is a detailed video on absolute and relative addressing in Excel. If you are not familiar with absolute references, I highly recommend watching it. Now let's repeat the copying of the formula, and we will get the correct result. Next, we will calculate the total for the order by multiplying the quantity by the price. Similarly, we will fill in the column with cities. The range we are interested in includes only 3 columns. However, if we have to choose a large range that does not fit on your screen, it can be quite difficult to quickly determine the number of columns in the range. After selecting the range, we will need to specify the number of the column we need. Excel can help with this. You can refer to the tooltip that displays the number of selected rows and columns. Therefore, using this tooltip, you can easily determine the number of the column of interest. Don't forget about absolute references for the range. Then we specify the third argument of the function. The column we need will be the third in the selected range, so we specify 3. The last argument, exact match, will be set to 0. So, task accomplished. Similarly, you can create formulas by referring to values on other worksheets. For example, the price list is on a separate sheet and we need to pull prices into the table with orders. We create a formula in the same way, but when selecting the required values, we switch between sheets. In the end, we will get exactly the same result. Now let's discuss the most common reasons why the VLOOKUP function may not work correctly. Perhaps the most common mistake is not fixing the range in the function arguments. For example, we have a menu and need to calculate the cost of lunch based on it. We will use the VLOOKUP function and input the arguments. When selecting the range, we forget to make the references absolute using the F4 key. As a result, the first value is pulled incorrectly, and if we autofill the formula, we will see an error only in the last item of the order. When examining the formulas, it becomes clear that the range in each formula shifts. If the lookup value is still found in the shifted range, the correct price is displayed. However, when searching for the price of juice, the VLOOKUP function does not find the lookup value in the range, and returns an error. If there was no juice in the order, the error would not manifest itself, but it would appear later. Since the formula has worked before, you will be sure it is correct, and an error will confuse you. Therefore, it is important to remember the following rule: if the VLOOKUP function is intended to be used not in a specific cell but to copy the formula across a range, always fix the range by making the references absolute. The second common problem is that the lookup value is absent from the range. It is not necessary for the value to be physically absent, it is enough for there to be errors in the name. This can be a grammatical error or an extra space that is invisible to the user but is perceived by Excel as a separate character, ultimately leading to an error when using the VLOOKUP function. Therefore, when an error appears, it is worth checking for the presence of the lookup value in the table, as well as checking for grammar and the absence of extra spaces. The third common problem is that the value returned by the VLOOKUP function is incorrect. This is usually explained by the presence of duplicates in the source table. The VLOOKUP function always searches from top to bottom, and stops when it finds the first match. This means that if there are duplicates in the source table, VLOOKUP will return the value corresponding to the first one, the one that is higher up in the table. Therefore, if the function is not working correctly, it is important to check for duplicates. If it is important to keep duplicates in the source table, but you need to return not the first found value but for example the second, then the VLOOKUP function will not be suitable, and you will need to use other Excel functions. If the VLOOKUP function was working correctly, but suddenly stopped, check the range of values. When working with the table, you may have inserted new rows into it, and the previously fixed range no longer covers all the data you need. Additionally, inserting new columns will affect the function's operation. It will lead to data shift, and the column number specified in the VLOOKUP function will output data from another area of the table. This is a significant drawback of the VLOOKUP function, so it is essential to carefully monitor the preservation of the original table size. An incorrectly specified or omitted range lookup argument can also cause the VLOOKUP function to work incorrectly. Remember that the range lookup argument determines what kind of match we want to achieve, approximate or exact. This argument is optional, but if it is not specified, it will default to true, meaning an approximate match. In this case, the VLOOKUP function assumes that the first column of the range is sorted in ascending order. The function will also look through the column from top to bottom, and will stop at the row that precedes the row with a value greater than the lookup value. If such a row is not found, the function will return the value from the last row of the range. It can be difficult to understand, so let's examine the range lookup argument in detail with an example. We have a list that specifies the name and quantity of purchased goods. There is also a price list, where prices depend on the volume of the purchased batch. The task consists of 3 parts. First, we need to determine which batch each transaction belongs to, retail, wholesale, or large wholesale. Then, based on the selected batch, we will input the price and calculate the total order amount. In an auxiliary table, the conditions that determine the price of the goods are listed. Specifically, a batch of 1 to 10 units will be considered retail, from 10 to 50 units will be wholesale, and over 50 units will be large wholesale. Inserting this data into the main table is quite simple. We will use the VLOOKUP function with the range lookup set to 1. However, we will need an auxiliary column with the criteria. In this column, we will specify the lower boundary of the value ranges. Note that the values in the auxiliary column are arranged in ascending order. This is important for applying the approximate match argument. The VLOOKUP function will compare the value from the quantity column of the main table with the criteria. As soon as a greater value is found, the function will return to the previous cell and count the specified number of columns to the right to return the value from that cell. In other words, the VLOOKUP function with the approximate match argument will look for the nearest lesser value for the lookup value. This task can also be solved using the if function, specifically with several nested if functions and multiple conditions. We would need to check which interval the current value belongs to. However, the VLOOKUP function allows us to significantly shorten the formula. So, the first part of the task is completed, and now we will pull the price. Again, we can avoid complications with the if function by adding a helper column to the criteria table. To input the price, we will use the extended price list, relying on the name of the product. Relative to the product column, the retail price column will be the second, the wholesale price column will be the third, and the large wholesale price column will be the fourth. We will supplement the criteria table with these numbers. Now we will insert a new column into the main table. Using VLOOKUP function, we will transfer the column numbers into it. We will rely on the values previously input into the table, and perform the search in the range that includes the newly created column. This time, we will use an exact match. All that's left is to pull in the prices. We will proceed similarly. As the column number in the function, we will use a reference to the corresponding column. Let's compare the prices in the order list with the price list. Everything is correct. Let's hide the helper column and calculate the total for each order. We've accomplished the task. The name of the range lookup argument is not very descriptive, and therefore not everyone understands the logic behind this argument. Exact match is most commonly used, but if you need to apply the VLOOKUP function as in the example discussed, this argument can be renamed to the question, is the sorting done? We can only use this argument if the values in the column are sorted in ascending order. The disadvantages of the VLOOKUP function stem from the principles of its operation. Firstly, the function only searches for the value in the first, leftmost, column of the range and continues the search only to the right of that column. However, there may be situations where searching needs to be done to the left of the column, which the VLOOKUP function cannot do. The second disadvantage is that the function specifies a continuous range. This means that if the lookup value is located 20 columns away from the first column, we need to select all of them. If you later need to delete some intermediate columns or add new ones, the formula will have to be adjusted because the VLOOKUP function will return incorrect values. The VLOOKUP function has an alternative, a formula consisting of two functions, index and match. In combination, these functions can completely replace the VLOOKUP function, and are free from the previously mentioned disadvantages. Additionally, in the latest versions of Excel, a new function, XLOOKUP, has been introduced, which also addresses lookup tasks. All of these functions will be covered in the following videos. Please rate the video if you find it useful, subscribe to the channel, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.